Welcome back, everyone. It's so good to see everyone. And if you're new here, welcome. My name is Eric Rohr. Today, we're going over 5 tips for creators. And pardon the different setup, I'm currently on my way to a job for my photography company. So we had to do things a little bit differently. I'm driving and just switching it up. So welcome. Okay, so like I said, we're going over 5 tips for creators. If you're a photographer, cinematographer, graphic artist, whatever it is you do in the creative field, this is all-purpose advice. And yeah, that's what we're doing today. So if you work in the creative field and perhaps it's a side hustle at this point, perhaps it's your full-time job. Pardon the bumps. I'm on a bumpy road. But if you work in the creative field, this is for you, and I hope you get something out of this. And if you do, a like and subscribe is always super appreciated. Perhaps it's your way of showing appreciation to us, to our channel, what we do. Always appreciated. So let's jump in. Enough jibber jabber. Let me hit you with the first tip of the day. Tip number 1, if you are working on a project and you're working on the same type of project that you typically work on, right? So let's say, for example, you are a wedding photographer and you do a lot of weddings, right? A lot of the time, at least again, in my experience, and this is why I'm creating this video, to share my experience with you, you can end up doing the same type of shots, the same type of work, the same, just more of the same of what you always do. And that can get very repetitive and just lame and not fulfilling creatively. And what I want you to do is that even though you have to go do your job or you want to go do this project, I want you to go and just switch things up and do things differently. And perhaps look for inspiration in different places. So if, let's say, again, in my example, you have a wedding coming up or an engagement party that you're shooting or whatever it is, I want you to go and explore inspiration in different places. So if, for example, if you have a wedding that's coming up and you're shooting, God damn, that's a nice car. Holy shiitake mushroom. Damn, that's beautiful. Wow. It's a nice, 1970 Ferrari. Ooh, I wish I had some B-roll of that. But back to my point, go and get inspiration from different places. And I want you to switch things up, do things a little bit differently. I can't give you specific examples of how you should go and do that, but I want you to look at what you do and be like, how can I do this differently? How can I switch it up and just switch things up and do things differently and make it exciting again? I want you to feel the way that you felt the first time you did your thing. So like the first time you picked up a camera, what did that feel like? What was that emotion? I want you to somehow go back to that state, that mindset. And whatever your creative field is, go and do it for that. So that's tip number 1, you guys. Let's move on to tip number 2. That was a bit of a long one. Before we continue to tip number 2, I want you to do me a favor. I want you to stick around till the last tip. I know it's a big ass, watch the whole video. I know, I get it. Trust me, I get it. I have ADD too, as you can probably tell by how fast I talk. But stick around for the last tip, because I promise it's not, my whole shtick is that when I create a YouTube video, I really try to create content and share ideas that aren't popular on YouTube and aren't, just plain and repetitive and stuff you've heard before. I really try to bring unique ideas to the table and share unique advice so that I can help people, actually advance and get better at their craft. So that being said, please stick around till the end. Hopefully that's a good one. That one will really blow your mind. Okay, so let's move on to tip number 2. Okay, so tip number 2. I have this friend, let's call him YF. Those are his initials. And YF and I always talk about how consistency is the key to everything, right? Especially something like YouTube or photography or graphic design. Consistency is everything. And that is tip number 2 for today. When you're working on something, a lot of the times we can really get lost on this notion that we want everything to be instantaneous. And in the world of 2024 that we live in, with things like social media and, Netflix and all of that, instantaneous is kind of the way of life these days. Amazon, right? It really is that way, especially when you look at creators online. And of course, we all do that, myself included. We see these YouTube channels of, 1 million subscribers. We see these Instagram accounts of 500,000 followers. We look at it and we're like, I want that right away. And the truth of the matter is that everyone who's doing the thing that you want to be doing or that you want to be successful at really also started at zero. And this one may be a little cliche, but I cannot stress how important it is to be consistent. I was actually just having a chit chat with a different friend of mine, and we were talking about this notion of consistency. And I myself have been having this mindset of like, hey, I've been putting in work for the last 2 or 3 years, and like, why am I not seeing the results? And he's like, dude, like, these things take 5-10 years. And I'm like, holy shit, like, you're actually right. Like, we really do need to have a consistent mindset and really just day in, day out, week in, week out, create another video. We need to be consistent in our goals and stick with them long term, because at the end of the day, the reward of hard work and the reward of something that's amazing as having a free lifestyle, such as being a YouTuber or, you know, being a freelance photographer, something that's has that big of a reward at the end isn't going to come easy. And the only way to really obtain such a goal is through consistent hard work. Tip number 3. Tip number 3 is a very important one. This one's actually, I believe it was coined by one author, but I looked it up before this video just to make sure. And apparently Steve Jobs said this. But the concept is like this. The concept is, it's called to just ship things. And what am I talking about? So the concept of just shipping something is this notion of that when something is done, right? So let's say, for example, you are editing a photo, right? So if you've ever opened Lightroom in your life, you'll know that the permutations that you can create in Lightroom are really, truly endless. And that can really lead you. So guys, moving on to tip number 3. Tip number 3 is what I call just ship things. Now, I thought one author coined this term, but apparently when I researched it before this video, I was mistaken. And Steve Jobs is the one that actually came up with this. The CEO and founder of Apple. So it's like this. Just shipping things. Now, just shipping things basically means that when you're working on something can be technically done and completed, but we're always striving for the perfection of it, right? So maybe if I tweak this video, 2% more, it'll be perfect. Or maybe if I spend another 20 minutes editing this photo or this flyer that I'm working on for a client or this piece of music that I'm trying to put out, maybe it'll be perfect. And we get so caught up in, we've completed 99% of it. We've even completed 100% of it. But at the end of the day, we always get stuck on that 101%, right? We get stuck in like, let's make it extra perfect. Let's really make it, how can I make this 100% perfect? And what ends up happening is we get stuck, right? And like, when I buy the proper gear to start a YouTube channel, then I'll start my YouTube channel. When I have the perfect camera, I'll open my photography business. And we get stuck by wanting everything to be perfect before we even get started, right? And that's really where this concept of just shipping things really comes in, is because at the end of the day, nothing is going to be perfect, right? If I create something that's perfect in my eyes, right, and I really nail that 101%, right? If I show it to somebody who's been doing this for way longer and is way more skilled at my craft, is gonna be like, bro, Eric, come on, it's a piece of garbage. But what we have to do is we have to get into this habit of just shipping things, because at the end of the day, just shipping things is really what is going to allow us to get better at our craft, right? Like if you go back, and I highly recommend that you do this, go look at my first video. My first video in comparison to this is going to be my 12th video, but my first video was horrible in comparison. And since I got into the habit of just shipping things, be like, Eric, it's not perfect, but we got to put it out, right? So I just put it out there. And yeah, maybe you're scared of, people judging you or looking at it or thinking like, oh my God, this guy is horrible at whatever he does. But my guys, go ship things and put it out there. And I promise each time you do that, you will get better at things. And that is how you grow. And that is how you get into the habit of consistency. And that's how you're going to get to your goals one. Okay, moving on to tip number 4, you guys. I figured I would pull over and do this a little more normally. Okay. Moving on to tip number 4. So tip number 4 is what I call the zoomed out perspective. Do you know that scene from Infinity War where Doctor Strange pushes Spider-Man out of his body and Spider-Man's kind of like playing around with his astral form? So essentially, Spider-Man is looking at his own body and is looking at himself from a zoomed out perspective. And why I think that's so important, I think a lot of times in our creative projects, when we get caught up in, a specific detail of it, we get very caught up in specific details. So let's say, for example, in my case, creating YouTube videos. So I might get very caught up in the color grading, right? And I might spend 5 hours on the color grading and then only, 20 minutes recording A-roll, or I might forget about B-roll. And we get very caught up in these little specific details and we get stuck on them. And then we're like, I don't know. And we get in this like bad negative mindset. And my tip for you guys is I want you to take whatever it is you're working on, whatever it is you're going through, and I want you to zoom out, same way Spider-Man does. And I want you to zoom out and look at the whole thing as a whole, right? I want you to look at everything from a zoomed out perspective. And I think when we can have that mindset, when we can have that perspective of zoomed out, we can really see things for what they are. And is this project going to work? Is it going to work out? Is it going to be a hit or is it going to be a miss? Have that zoomed out perspective and stop getting caught up in these tiny little details and getting caught in your own head. Okay, moving on to tip number 5, you guys. This one, I said in the beginning, this is probably the most important, but I cannot stress this enough. In the world we live in, and especially in the area of economics, we have this thing called compound interest. Everyone's heard of that. But I want you to take this element of compound interest and apply it to your life and apply it to the projects you're working on. Apply it to just your personal life. Now, bear with me. I'm going to do some math on this one and follow along, okay? If you go to the gym on Sunday, right? Today's Sunday. If you go to the gym on Sunday and you do 50 push-ups, right? And then you're sore for the whole week, right? What's going to end up happening is you did 50 push-ups on Sunday, and then you did Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, you did 0, right? So total for the week, you did 50. Now, if you go to the gym on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, right, so on and so forth, and you do 10 every day, right, you might do a little bit at a time, right? But by the end of the week, you'll have done more than the guy who can do 50 in one shot. So the point I'm making is I want you to have this mindset of compound interest when it comes to your work. So maybe you're like, oh shoot, I need to edit 5,000 pictures. I need to, create 10 pieces of art for a client. I need to film and shoot A-roll and edit and color grade and sound design, all that shit. And what ends up happening is you get so caught up in doing one thing that you end up burning yourself out for a longer period of time. So my advice to you is I want you to take each day, each task, each thing, and do little by little by little. And it's what I like to call baby steps. Baby steps are the thing that it's going to truly get you from point A to point B, but also allow you to go from point A to point B over and over and over again. If you keep getting caught up and you keep getting burnt out, you're not going to make gains. Pardon my gym pun, but you're not going to make gains and you're not really going to get to the place you want to go to. Maybe you'll get that project completed, but will you score on the overall scale? Also, I apologize for the cars in the back. It is what it is. Yeah, that's it. Peace out, homies.